Venezuela is a complete mess. We all agree. We may disagree on how Venezuelans got there. Let me explain this in the simplest, most factual way possible. Venezuela's economic collapse did not begin with US sanctions. The data shows the collapse was already happening years before any meaningful sanctions were introduced. The crisis really starts in 2013, right after Maduro comes to power. That year, the economy shrinks, inflation rises sharply, and shortages begin getting worse. Inflation is the result of printing money. By 2014, Venezuela is already in a deep recession, and this is long before any major sanctions. By 2015, inflation hits around 180%, and by 2016, it reaches nearly 800%. At this point, the United States has only placed individual sanctions on government officials for human rights abuses, nothing that targets the overall economy or oil sector. So the early collapse cannot be blamed on sanctions, but because they simply weren't affecting the economy yet. So what was causing the collapse? Socialism, internal policy decisions. Extremely strict price controls force companies to sell goods below production costs, causing factories and farms to shut down. Currency controls created a massive black market that rewarded corruption. The government nationalized over 1,000 private companies and over 2,000 small businesses, and many of them were mismanaged into the ground after being taken over. Then there's the oil industry, which was the heart of Venezuela's economy. President Hugo Chavez fired about 18,000 experienced oil workers back in 2003 and replaced them with political loyalists. This move permanently damaged PDVSA, which is the national oil company. Oil production began dropping long before sanctions, from over 3 million barrels per day down to under 2 million by 2017. That decline was caused by corruption, lack of investment, and loss of expertise, not by external US pressure. So by the time the US introduced stronger sanctions in the first Trump administration in 2017 and later in 2019, Venezuela was already in free fall. The economy was destroyed, hyperinflation was raging, and millions of citizens had left the country. Those later sanctions absolutely made this situation worse. Nobody denies that. But they did not cause the original collapse. They accelerated a collapse that was already happening due to internal problems. Most economists, including the IMF and independent experts, agree that roughly 70 to 80% of the crisis was driven by internal policy failures, and about 20 to 30% was worsened by sanctions afterwards. So no matter how someone feels politically, that's the factual timeline. So the reality is, the collapse is mainly the result of years of mismanagement, corruption, price control, nationalizations, the destruction of Venezuela's private sector, and the destruction of Venezuela's oil industry. Sanctions later intensified the crisis, but they weren't the original trigger. The economic model itself was already failing long before outside pressure appeared. Now, let me be clear on this. Trump is not against Venezuela. The US is not against Venezuelans. What he really means, he is against a cartel. The US is not going to war with Venezuela. The US is going to war with the Cartel of the Suns, a criminal empire. They are behind 80,000 American deaths every year from cocaine and fentanyl. Billions of dollars laundered through the US banks, funding extremist groups inside America, acting as Iran and Hamas proxies in the hemisphere. And also, they're responsible for many trendy Arawa crime and killings across America. Trump made clear already this isn't about regime change nor liberating a country. This is about defending Americans from cartel. So in 2025, the U.S. Treasury Department designated Cartel de los Soles, or Cartel of the Suns, described as a criminal network linked to high-level Venezuelan officials and military, as a specially designated global terrorist organization. The move claimed these groups provide material support to other designated criminal or terror groups. The US government sees Venezuela under Maduro as a narco state, alleging that illicit drug trafficking, including cocaine and potentially other drugs, flows from Venezuela and constitutes a serious security threat to the US. As a part of that policy, since September 2025, the US military reportedly began strikes on vessels suspected of drug trafficking, many allegedly linked to Venezuelan routes, claiming over 80 deaths resulting from such strikes. And believe me, it's okay to feel proud to the fact that international criminals such as El Chapo or Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar or even Osama bin Laden were stopped by the US involvement. But you need to understand that there are things way bigger and wicked and wretched than what Chapo or bin Laden or even Escobar ever imagined. So stay with me. We're talking about a small country, but a big hell. The reality is that peace without war is impossible. Actually, the basis of physical, mental, moral, and even spiritual life is war, is antagonism. It is an open fact that war can destroy but also create. And I'm not talking about war as a business or a jobs generator. I'm talking about this. Freedom and prosperity always had a price in blood. I know mainstream media is strongly opposed to the idea of giving military help to the Venezuelan people in order to restore their freedom from Cubans, Russians, and Iranians. The New York Times, Russia Today, CNN, Washington Post, and other biased journalists are prone to the idea of keeping the new Hitler of the Americas in power. If mass murder, famine, and tyranny did not change your mind about Venezuela, maybe you are being naive, believing the press. But I will provide you with 12 powerful reasons the United States must end the Maduro's regime now. Number 1. Venezuela is already intervened by external forces. Actually, some analysts call it a new type of Iranian colony. Their government is totally controlled by the Castros from Cuba, and between the Chinese and the Russians, they own all of their economy, vast reserves of gold, minerals, gas, and oil. Venezuelans protesting and dying in the streets of Caracas definitely are not fighting against Maduro but against an international criminal mafia they will never get rid of without any assistance. Hezbollah has military bases inside Venezuela. Venezuelans do not own their own country. They did not even elect Maduro in a free election. The only election Chavistas won without a sham was the first one in 1999. And by then, Chavez was actually promising freedom, justice, business, capitalism, and good trade relationships with the US at that time. So you cannot even say, well, you know what, Venezuelans deserve that for voting socialist. When actually most voters were inspired to support Chavez after Bill Clinton, yes, Clinton received him in the White House and offered him the best relationships and trade support. Some sources say that after 1999, every single election was rigged by Cuban intelligence using the Smartmatic system. You just have to Google this if you don't believe it. And you may also say, well, Venezuelans deserve Maduro's tyranny because they don't rebel. They just don't overthrow him. Well, you know what? Gun control is a thing tyrants do. Normal people can't do anything against a tyranny if they don't have arms. Reason number two, this is not a conspiracy. It's happening. Usually, people love to point out that Trump retaliation with the regime, it's only a show for getting Cuban and Venezuelan votes. And, over 421,000 legal Venezuelans live in Florida. Or because of oil, we just want their oil. But fact is, the European Union and Canada also show support for the liberty cause. United Kingdom is involved in this liberty cause. Japan have told Venezuelans they support their liberty cause. Fracking has made America no longer dependent on external oil sources for the first time in history. So the fact that the US government supports Maria Corina, which is a Nobel Peace Prize winner, to overthrow Maduro does not make it a CIA plot. This is not a CIA movie. This is a common Democrat or left-wing talking point. Every time there is a military coup against the leftists and the US is pleased, suddenly the CIA did it. Accurate only in the conspiratorially minded who see the nefarious hand of the CIA in every turn of global events. People, this is true. Even though we may consider the Venezuelan issue as mainstream now, Venezuelans have been protesting and craving for freedom almost every single year over 2 decades in a row. Reason number 3, they have already tried everything. So Venezuelans have not deposed the regime in 25 years of elections, dialogues, peace deals, and brutal street conflicts because Venezuelans are disarmed, hungry, they're trying to survive. Way too many young people have been shot, raped, and brutally tortured just for standing against evil. 90% of their mainstream and recognized political opposition is actually a plan from the dictatorship. So the international community of nations tried everything as well already, from diplomatic problems, financial pressure, to long-term oil embargoes, from firing ambassadors to sentences in Hague. The military's loyalty is enforced by Cubans embedded within the armed forces. And the Venezuelan diaspora are essentially prevented from helping due to gun control, firearm export regulations, and currency controls. So it is a big fantasy to believe an unarmed and starving population similar to, innocent Jewish people in German concentration camps, you remember that? Can just rise up and overthrow a military tyrant. Bullies don't understand. A bully won't understand a peace deal, a diplomatic effort. One must fight force with force. Founding fathers wouldn't start independence without guns. Reason number 4. When facing evil, being neutral is not an option. The United States has diplomatic relationships with foreign countries, and therefore the US must decide who it recognizes as its counterpart. There is no avoiding a decision like this. The US must either recognize Maduro or recognize Maria Corina, or recognize no one. This is not about the US enforcing their way of life to others. This is about the US establishing relations with a counterpart and determining who can and who cannot be an ambassador, or who is accountable for ownership of assets like bank accounts, visas, oil revenues, properties. And this is also about human empathy. If your neighbor next door is always abusing and beating his wife, you'd probably call 911. And that's not interfering in other people's issues. That's your moral duty, especially when we talk about millions of malnourished kids, helpless seniors, separated families, and a whole bunch of human pain. Oh, come on, this is not boogaloo crap or toilet paper scarcity jokes. This is real deep and profound human suffering caused by psychopaths with more power and greed than comic book villains. Reason number five, you cannot ignore reality. War is terrible. That's true for all people and all wars. Yet, the experience is Americans live in security, prosperity, and political freedom like nowhere else in the world due to the fact that they've secured themselves from both the British colonizers, the Nazi threat, and the Soviets. So, thanks to American involvement, communism was defeated. And nowadays, world terrorists like ISIS and Hamas have an enemy they fear. So it is common to hear things like, oh, no, we need to focus in our own problems. I think that's true, but that's no reason to ignore Hezbollah training camps, or Russian influence, or drugs flowing in America, or sex trafficking. All of that happening in Venezuela, especially when Maduro's drug mafia is using American financial system, and the harm that is making in America's backyard include strong American allies such as Colombia, Mexico, or Ecuador. So not doing anything is also doing. If you choose to be neutral, you chose to keep the oppressor in business. Reason number six. This is a good one. We should never forget our people. Nearly 50,000 American expats live in Venezuela, some of them with their families. And most of them arrived when the country was safe and prosperous like 20 years ago. And they had their family established in the country. And among them, you may even find businessmen, engineers, gospel missionaries, and many Americans were imprisoned under Maduro just for the sake of being American. American tourists and those living in the country were really mistreated by the Maduro government. Many American journalists spent years in Venezuelan prisons. Many American companies, properties, and factories have been seized and expropriated with all of their assets by the Chavista government. Even Citgo American executives were imprisoned in a business travel to Caracas. Americans have been ridiculed and derided in almost every public allocution of the tyrant. American flags are burned every month in Caracas. The threat to American people in Venezuela is so big, Washington had to close their embassy in Caracas. Is it not the responsibility of a government for the people and by the people to protect its citizens, even those living abroad? Number seven, Iraq or Vietnam were a real deal. This is easy cake. I know you've heard about Iranian, Chinese, Cuban, and Russian troops in Venezuela. I know you're concerned about guerrillas, armed collectivos, or creating a second Vietnam. But people, even when Maduro's powers enough to kill everyone and do whatever they want, that's only because he keeps the entire population disarmed. That's the reason he controls everything. They have the guns, but honestly, this is not going to be a big deal for our Marines. Most of those Venezuelan troops serve more as repressors of mass protests for the dictatorship than actually a military power. Invading Venezuela will be so easy it could last a couple of weeks or even less. Their military are poorly trained, demoralized, unpatriotic, corrupt, and there's a lot of video evidence. Most of them are scared chickens. We're not talking about Islamic extremists here. We're talking about just teenagers with rifles and hungry, and they just don't know what to do. Venezuela is the size of Texas. They have pretty much about the same territory and the same population, but most of their military power is concentrated in Caracas, which is their biggest city. And Caracas is the size of Manhattan. In Venezuela, people usually record videos of the very poor military training they offer. Please Google this. Those videos are supposed to be a warning sign to the US, but watch a couple of them. You're gonna have lots of fun. Number 8, take a look at history. The United States won its independence from the British Crown with crucial support from France and Spain. Europe's liberation from the Nazi Reichstag was achieved thanks to the United States, England, and Russia. The independence of South American countries from the Spanish crown was secured with the help from England and Venezuela's George Washington, Simon Bolivar. So, do you notice the pattern? No one can defeat a murderous regime alone. Throughout history, rebels who face a tyrannical government, one that represses or kills its own citizens, have always sought assistance, support, and external resources. Today, more than ever, foreign influence, whether through actions or ideas, is inevitable and is part of an increasingly interconnected world. Venezuela was one of the first democracies of the hemisphere. In a time where dictators ruled South America, John F. Kennedy decided to support Venezuela as the only real democracy and friend of the USA in the region. They were the freest country down the border, and even the great Ronald Reagan considered Venezuela the strongest democracy in Latin America by the time of his mandate. Number 9. Venezuela is ready. Commander Craig Fowler said the US should do it. Marco Rubio loves the idea. Eric Prince already said he can do all the job without taxpayers' money. The legitimate Supreme Court of Venezuela, TSJ in Exilio, is requesting a military intervention. The DEA set a price, $50 million bounty for Maduro's head. The OAS loves the idea. There are many underground right-wing political parties being formed, waiting for freedom to come. Maria Corina, with 70% of support, wants it. Their interim government authorized Venezuela to return to the Inter-American Treaty of Reciprocal Assistance in 2019. And the most important thing, most Venezuelan citizens agree to the idea. Number 10, your pocket is already involved. You didn't know this, but you have a skin in the game. Your hard-earned taxpayers' money is already being spent in helping with aid to the migrant crisis. 9 million Venezuelans already left their country in the biggest exodus, the biggest migrant caravan ever known in history after the Syrian refugee crisis. Mike Pence tweeted the U.S. government already gave $213 million in humanitarian assistance to Venezuelans. USAID gave Guaido's team $430 million. On top of that, the USS Comfort provided healthcare assistance to Venezuelan immigrants in Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, so your money is already there. But if Maduro is not stopped, and now, all that money will be wasted and will never be returned back in the form of trade deals and investments. Remember how Maduro burned the food your pocket donated to Venezuelans in 2019? So American oil companies such as Chevron has invested $100 million in 2006. So imagine all of this massive amount of money being lost. America has 200,000 soldiers deployed overseas who enroll to do something significant for their lives and country. Cleaning all day and board in their military bases sounds more expensive than a 30-day operation in a sunny Caribbean country full of beautiful ladies and soldiers who run like chickens when they see a drone. Number 11. Venezuela is a real threat. When Iranian terrorist General Soleimani was killed by a US drone, Venezuela was the only country in the world giving him a post-mortem tribute. Caracas is the only place in the continent with a North Korean embassy and a Kalashnikov facility. Kalashnikov, for you to know, is a Russian machine gun factory. Maduro is also funding FARC in Colombia. He's funding the Ortega regime in Nicaragua. He's also funding Hezbollah, and he's a big promoter of Iran, Palestine, Turkey. The Center for a Secure and Free Society in Washington, D.C. conducted an investigation which result was that the Iranian embassy in Caracas is used as a laboratory for spreading terrorism across the Americas. Also, it's known that Venezuela is always providing passports to terrorists so they can move freely around the globe. The DEA has been following El Cartel de los Soles for many years, and this is the biggest drug cartel in the hemisphere, linked to Venezuelan government and laundering their money in American financial system. They are also doing the greatest food scheme to scam many companies, and it's called the clap. Maduro is even calling Puerto Rico to be independent. They have tried to go to war with Guyana, US ally, and the list goes on. Cuba's friend Barack Obama recognized Venezuela was an unusual and extraordinary threat to the peace of the hemisphere. I mean, even Obama believed into what I'm saying. They are a threat. Number 12. This is not the typical banana republic story. A coup is an attempt to depose a government, not a mafia cartel. Maduro runs a mafia, not a government. It is incorrect to call the opposition's attempts to restore the rule of law to Venezuela as a coup. But let's say it is a government. Okay, let's say Maduro is a government. Well, it was elected in sham elections and it has no international legitimacy. Nearly every single nation has left Venezuela along with America. Now, us, as the world leaders, have a responsibility in the hemisphere. As the greatest military power in the world, remember what you had to recite every morning in the school. We are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we need to do more than thoughts and prayer. Okay, so what can I do? We all know politicians nowadays won't do anything for principles. They will only do something if they believe it will get them votes. So, first thing, keep voting Republican. Start a pledge with your senator, your congressman. Contact your congressman. Send him or her this video and share it in your social media. Tell people around you socialism is wrong and that Venezuela needs help. Support our troops. Support with a couple bucks, maybe the local Venezuelan think tanks advocating for free markets, such as the Patriot Society of Venezuela, and help American individuals who are giving it all for a free Venezuela, just like Lawrence Reed, Hunter Collins, Kyle Varner, Zach Foster, Michael Venner, who are talking about involvement, decisive involvement in the development for a freer future for all Venezuelans. Thank you for staying with me. I hope someday you can actually travel as a tourist or for business or even love to a free Venezuela. I honestly believe you're going to love it. And Venezuelans love America. They love Americans as much as they love baseball. They love how we fight for their rights and for the rights of everyone. Honestly, as a Christian, this was a difficult video for me. Human life is valuable. The Bible talks about a loving, forgiving, and caring God, but also about a God of justice, wrath, and war. Good and moral wars, of course, but wars in the end. God himself is called Jehovah of armies. He gives terrible and eternal punishment to those who deserve it. And my ultimate will is this conflict can be solved without any bloodshedding. Please pray for the innocent people of Venezuela. If you like my content, feel free to hit that subscribe button. See you in the next video.